Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss everything there is to know about fantasy football, from setting up your lineups, who to start, who to sit, who to pick up off the waiver wire, and who to drop. And as always, I am Jeremiah Martinez. I am your host. Like every Tuesday, I do the show solo. But anyways, let's get started. Let's get started on NFL Week 7, and then, of course, it ended like it does every week with Monday Night Football. And man, oh man, the last two games of Week 7 were just blunders, and especially Sunday night. Sunday night in a 6-6 tie. Not many fantasy performances, but I'll get that later. I'll get talking about that later. But let's talk about the Brock Osweiler Bowl last night in Denver. That was the Denver Broncos defeating the Houston Texans 27-9. And Brock Osweiler, as always, did not look good. He did not look good. He just didn't look good. That's all I gotta say. Trevor Siemian, he looked like what he always does, manages the game. But, there's no notable fantasy performances from the quarterback position on either of these two teams. So I'm not going to go any further on any of these two quarterbacks, because I feel like I don't need to, and I feel like you guys agree with me. But let's talk about the running backs, the big money position in fantasy. And Lamar Miller did play injured yesterday. He only had 11 carries on the ground, going for 61 yards. And Alfred Blue did get some time in as well. He had 11 carries for 63 yards, so he did outgain him by 2 yards, but that's something you have to monitor going forward with with this team. How's Lamar Miller going to be, moving forward, and is Alfred Blue going to take over? So there's some speculation there that maybe you should possibly pick up Alfred Blue just in case. But Lamar Miller still has to be treated as a top 5, top 10 fantasy running back weekly, and I would just pick up Alfred Blue, just in case Lamar Miller is going to have his carries limited, or if he's going to miss time with an injury if it happens to linger on throughout the week. So that's something I would have to look forward to, guys. And I might talk about Alfred Blue later in the show in my fantasy football waiver pickups for Week 8. And then let's go to the Denver Broncos backfield here. C.J. Anderson did get 107 yards and a touchdown on 16 carries on the ground, and he didn't get any touches through the air. Devontae Booker actually did play a pretty good game. His best game as a pro, got 18 total touches. He got 87 total yards and a touchdown. So his best game since being a pro, and this is probably his best game he's ever had. Probably the best game he's had so far in his young career. The Devontae Booker is a rookie from Utah, and I think what you have to do about this backfield moving forward is, you have to pretty much treat C.J. Anderson as a RB2, and you have to treat Devontae Booker as an RB2. Remember, this has the makings of the backfield like Atlanta. When you had Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman, And, I talked about earlier in the season about trusting either one of those guys. And I think you can do the same with the Denver running backs. This is a run-heavy football team. So I think Devontae Booker, I think he's worth using as an RB2 in your lineups. He's going to get time. Gary Kubiak said earlier last week that they wanted to get Devontae Booker involved more in this offense, and they did do it. And then, you've seen it last night. He's an effective runner. He did out-touch and did outgain C.J. Anderson the week prior. So I think Devontae Booker is going to get better from here on out, and I think he's someone you have to I think you have to pick up if he's still available in your league if he's not already. So I would treat Devontae Booker and C.J. Anderson as RB2s moving forward, but they're very valuable, especially in a run-heavy Denver offense. Speaking of offense, receivers didn't play a solid fantasy day yesterday, and for the Denver Broncos, Emmanuel Sanders was probably the one to put up the best numbers. He did have 86 receiving yards, only on 4 receptions, but he did get 8 targets. That's a lot. It's a lot of targets. He does average around those numbers every week. And Emmanuel Sanders, he does have the, he has the value of a receiver 3 or a second receiver. He is valuable. And speaking of the Denver's receivers, Demaryius Thomas did have a touchdown, but he only had 40 yards. A lot coming into the season, Denver Broncos receivers, they weren't really valued as high as last year coming into the season. And they performed well last year, too, despite the quarterback troubles from Peyton Manning and Brock Osweiler. But, they just they have been a little bit downgraded this year because, the Denver has stick to the run game. And that's why I think Devontae Booker and C.J. Anderson are so valuable. But these receivers, they have to be treated as, third receivers or your second receiver in your lineup. They're not going to be a top 10, top 5 play every week. Maybe top 20. I would treat them like that. Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders, but these guys are not going to get you 20 points, 15 points every game. They're probably going to get you around maybe even 10 or even lower than that. I'm going to have to do that going forward because, Trevor Siemian, he is a game manager. He's not going to have those big fantasy numbers that you want from a quarterback, but they're still valuable pieces. These are still really good receivers. They can score. They can still run routes. They're still involved. It just happens to be that this Denver offense is relied more heavily on the run, and I think they have to do that. But speaking of the Houston Texans receivers, DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller, they didn't really have a good fantasy day yesterday. DeAndre Hopkins, he was contained the whole entire game. He couldn't do anything against this Denver Broncos defense. DeAndre Hopkins had 12 targets, only 36 yards. Will Fuller only had 7 targets, only had 22 yards. Yeah, and I think we kind of expected this kind of production from the Houston Texans receivers, coming into the game, especially against a really good defensive team in Denver. But, moving forward, I think the players that you have to look out for both of these teams, Devontae Booker and Alfred Blue. I do think they're going to be more involved in their team's offensive game plans moving forward. And I really do like what I saw from Devontae Booker. I think he's someone that's going to be really valuable, and I think he's going to be a really good player in this league, and I think he's going to be an effective fantasy running back this year, but I do think next year he might be the starter, but that is next year. But let's look at the Houston Texans schedule coming up here. Okay, well, they have the they have, looking forward here, they do have the Lions next Sunday. And they have the Jacksonville Jaguars after that, and then the Oakland Raiders. So they have some pretty good defensive matchups there for the receivers there. And you gotta keep firing up DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller as your receivers. You kind of have to. You just do. There's no way you can sit those guys. There's just no way. But looking at the Denver Broncos schedule here, they play the San Diego Chargers, a pretty solid defense, but they still give up a lot of points. You got the Oakland Raiders, who give up a lot of points, and they're getting the Raiders at home, where the Raiders don't play really good. And they got the Saints. So those are pretty good matchups for the running backs and the receivers there in Denver. But we're going to take our first break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, and I'm going to talk about some top performers from this week in fantasy. And as well as later on the show, we'll talk about my top waiver wire pickups of the week, like I do every Tuesday. But we'll be right back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And this time I get into some top fantasy performers of the week for Week 7. And, of course, I got to talk about Jay Ajayi. He looks like he is the real deal. Going for his second straight 200-yard rushing game. Who would have thought? I didn't think he was going to do it. I didn't think he was going to do it at all. And I remember Anthony and I talked about Jay Ajayi on his on our Friday show. We're saying if he's for real or not. He is the real deal. He has been straight balling for 2 straight games, and he's someone that's a RB1, RB2 the rest of the way. You have to insert him in your lineups now, especially with Arian Foster retiring. He announced it earlier on Monday afternoon or night. You have to fire up Jay Ajayi as your pretty much your RB2 or RB1. I think he is a must start. I think he is. He has some pretty good matchups going forward. I think he's a must start. And I do like what I'm seeing from Jay Ajayi so far this season. And it's all I can say. He is in Flago. He's on fire, guys. Got to put him in there. Ride a high streak while it's hot. All right, anyway, let's get into another running back here. Melvin Gordon of the San Diego Chargers been really good this year. He didn't have the huge rushing game, but he did get 2 touchdowns. And I'm loving what I'm seeing from Melvin Gordon. He has 8 total touchdowns of the year. That's all. This is a guy I didn't think that can even run past 2 yards. Man, what a year he's had for the San Diego Chargers. And, he did struggle as a rookie, and I didn't think he was going to struggle again. How have the tables have turned? Melvin Gordon struggled as a rookie last year, and Melvin Gordon is one of the top fantasy performers in the running back position. Todd Gurley, on the other hand, was one of the top rookies last year and one of the top fantasy performers. But man, he's hitting a sophomore slump. And it's funny how the tides have turned. It is funny, but I do like Melvin Gordon moving forward. He's definitely a guy you have to plug in your lineups. He's someone that's always going to get those goal line possessions. And remember, touchdowns are worth 6 points, guys, and that is really valuable. He did get over 30 points this game against the Atlanta Falcons. But I think he's someone that's been very valuable. I didn't expect this kind of production from him coming into the year. I just didn't. Then we're going to talk about the quarterback position now. Andrew Luck had a great game against the Tennessee Titans. He had 353 yards and no touchdowns, I believe. He didn't have a single touchdown. Wow. That's a pretty good game, though, you guys. Oh, actually, no. I take that back. He did have 3 touchdowns, 3 passing. I was looking at his rushing numbers for some reason. But he did have 3 touchdowns and over 350 yards, and he looks like he is back. Remember, Andrew Luck looked like he hit a wall last year, and he looks like he is back as being the top fantasy quarterback. And remember, the Indianapolis Colts do not have a defense at all. They're always going to be behind, or they're always going to be in shootouts, and that is why Andrew Luck is so valuable. He looks like he's on his way to becoming the top 2, top 3 fantasy quarterbacks for the quarterback position, because I think Matt Ryan is still the top guy at the position, and I think he has a chance to finish as the top fantasy quarterback, Matt Ryan that is, but I do think Andrew Luck isn't far behind him. He is not far behind him. And I want to talk about Drew Brees. It hasn't been the best season for the New Orleans Saints, but Drew Brees continues to be a valuable fantasy quarterback. He had over 360 yards passing and 3 touchdowns against the Kansas City Chiefs, a really tough defense for that matter, at Arrowhead, which is a tough place to play for anybody. And, all I got to say about Drew Brees is it's the same thing. It's kind of similar to Andrew Luck where, you're going to be behind a lot in games. You're going to be in a lot of shootouts. You have a lot of offensive firepower. Well, weapons, that is, because Andrew Luck does have T.Y. Hilton. Drew Brees does have Brandon Cooks. Michael Thomas has emerged now as a top receiver in the Saints offense. So I think, Drew Brees, he's just being Drew Brees. That's all I can say. And, I want to get back to the running back position here. There's 2 running backs in particular I want to talk about. Jeremy Hill and LeGarrette Blount. LeGarrette Blount did have a real good game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had 127 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, the offensive game plan was to pretty much, for the Patriots that is, to control the clock at the end of the game. Because remember, the Patriots did have the lead late in this game with Big Ben out for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, the New England Patriots did have a 10-point lead, and having LeGarrette Blount as the guy to close out the game for you, it's pretty good, actually. We've seen his value in this team for the Patriots, and LeGarrette Blount, he's just a for sure RB2. I do admit he is a risky play weekly because of, what the Patriots are going to do, but he is someone that is very valuable, even with Tom Brady at quarterback. And Jeremy Hill, man, what a game he had. 168 yards on 9 carries and 1 touchdown. Remember, he had that long touchdown round too, but he did leave the game with an injury, and that is something that's very unfortunate. He looked like he was about to have a 250-yard rushing game for the Cincinnati Bengals against the Cleveland Browns. But, he's someone that you have to keep your eye on this week, but he's someone, he looks like he's back. He looks like he's back, and I think he's going to be on the RB1, RB2 map moving forward. High-end RB2, definitely a low-end RB1, but he's someone that you have to monitor, moving forward, especially on your team. And before we get to our second break here, I want to talk about A.J. Green. A.J. Green, he looks like he played like a man possessed against the Cleveland Browns. Another Bengal, that is. And he had 169 yards and 1 touchdown, and he is just someone that looks like he looks like he's just a top 5 receiver moving forward, and he's a must start. Of course, I don't have to go any further, but let's talk about that one lucky catch that he made. That was a touchdown. Remember, if he didn't have that, he has no touchdown. So, I do think, A.J. Green is coming to his own here as a top 5 receiver if he hasn't been already. And I remember he did struggle at times last year, but man, the connection he has with Andy Dalton is just phenomenal. And, he's just someone you just can't really start. he's just someone you can't really sit. I'm sorry, you can't sit him. He's a must start every week. And that's pretty much all I got to say about him. All I got to say. But we're going to take our second break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And I'm going to get into some top waiver wire pickups of the week when we get back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hey, we're back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, and it's time for your top waiver wire pickups of the week. And, of course, I got to start off with one of the top performers from Week 7, and that is Davante Adams, Green Bay Packers receiver. And remember, he has 16 targets, 16 against the Bears. And, that's the workload that he had in Green Bay's win. A number that led our receivers in Week 7. But, Adams isn't exactly known for, his reliable hands. He did have 13 catches, 132 yards, and finding the red zone twice. So he's not a lock for double-digit performances every week. But he has at least 7 chances in 4 of his last 6 games this season. That's targets I'm talking about. And he has 6 touchdowns this year. And he already has more fantasy points than he has had all last year. A year that we thought we were going to get a really phenomenal year from Adams in the absence of Jordy Nelson. But he's just been really disappointing last year. So, the Packers do travel to Atlanta to face, the defense that raised next to last in the past. That is the Atlanta Falcons. And Green Bay clearly doesn't have, the running game at the moment. But I do expect another 50-plus yard attempt game. Well, not 50-plus yard, but 50-plus pass attempts from Aaron Rodgers. So I wouldn't be surprised if Davante Adams had another useful fantasy day. And sticking with the wide receivers here, I'm going to go with Brandon LaFell. Brandon LaFell is another guy you need to pick up off the waiver wire. He is the Cincinnati Bengals number 2 receiver. He's been really reliable this year. And, he hauled in 4 touchdown passes over the last 3 games. He does have 21 targets. He did catch 14 of them. He remains the number 2 guy, like I said, in Cincinnati's offense, and I do think that benefits because of the extra attention that A.J. Green brings, especially with the Bengals ground game that they had. So, yeah, I think LaFell is the least. He's a complimentary receiver in this offense, and I think he does have a lot of favorable matchups, especially with A.J. Green taking most of the attention. And Andy Dalton just has been routinely looking his way. Washington, the team that their Cincinnati Bengals is going to face, they do have the middle of the pack defense. Josh Norman may not even be there. He is in concussion protocol. So I think this is a decent chance for LaFell to have a very solid game. And now going to the running back position, we got Chris Thompson here. Chris Thompson of the Washington Redskins dominated the backfield touches on Sunday. He carried the ball 12 times for 73 yards and caught 7 passes for 40. So he had over a 100-yard game. Matt Jones did struggle again, getting another fumble at the goal line. But that's been his problem over the past year. And Jay Gruden did say he refers Jones as a starting back, but I think that may change going forward. I wouldn't be surprised if Thompson gets implemented more in the offense. He's not the flashiest runner, but he is averaging 5.1 yards a carry, and he's capable of catching passes out of the backfield. So I think it's going to be tough for Gruden to, rely on Jones as the, number 1 back. I do think Thompson is going to get some touches moving forward. He's going to get more involved into this offense, and I just can't see, Matt Jones being the workhorse running back that we thought he would be. But I want to talk about a couple of veterans here, to round out the top waiver wire picks. I'm going to talk about Vernon Davis, another Washington Redskin. There's a report that Jordan Reed may not make the team trip to London for Week 8 because he's still in concussion protocol. Davis, I think that makes him an attractive waiver wire because he might start again. So the 11-year-old veteran who has made stops in Denver and most notably spent most of his career, that is, in San Francisco, he caught all 6 of his targets for 79 yards and the loss to the Detroit Lions on Sunday. So he will have a favorable matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think he's someone you have to stream. He's someone you might have to pick up. He's someone that you need in your lineup if we do need a tight end for Week 8. And to round out the top waiver wire pickups of the week, I'm going to go with Anquan Boldin. This is his 4th touchdown of the season. His 4th touchdown of the season on Sunday proved to be the game winner. Yes. Boldin's numbers of the season, they include 32 receptions for 272 yards. They're not impressive, but he is behind Marvin Jones and Golden Tate in the pecking order, but he continues to see targets in the red zone with Eric Ebron out, the tight end. So as long as Eric Ebron is out, I think Anquan Boldin will get a lot of red zone opportunities. That's why I think will make him a favorable waiver wire pickup. And that is my waiver wire pickups of Week 8. And as always, you can catch the show on a variety of platforms. That is iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, SoundCloud, and as well as the website, GSMCpodcast.com. You can also follow the show on Twitter at GSMC_FFootball. And you can also follow the show on Instagram at GSMC_FFootball. And you can also like the show on Facebook at the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. And I'm Jeremiah Martinez. And you have a nice day. And we'll be back here on Friday. Anthony will be back here. And thank you guys for tuning in.